Well, headline news for you. The AAA syllabus isn't changing very much in 24-25. The content of this video is relevant to anyone who's going to be sitting AAA from the September 24 exam sitting onwards through to the June 25 exam sitting. And all the information I'm presenting here is based on the new syllabus documents that ACCA have produced and the meeting I had with the examining team back in April of 2024 when they went through the updates to the syllabus. So here's a summary or agenda of what I'm going to go through. And the changes, they're all small, but they fall into two categories. Firstly, syllabus changes. Now, there is a slight change to the syllabus on quality management, and I mean slight. There's a whole new learning objective around ESG reporting, environmental, social and governance reporting, and it seems big, but as we'll go through shortly, it's actually not that big a deal. And then there's another new learning objective around sustainability assurance standards, which is a moving piece, a changing bit of the regulatory framework for auditors. And again, it's a new syllabus outcome, but it's not that big a deal. I'd summarise all three of those as don't worry too much. Now, the second area of change is in exam emphasis. And this stuff's really important. This has all come from the recent meeting with the examiner. Firstly, the examiner is going to continue using new style ROM questions, which we'll go through shortly. There will be more knowledge questions included than there have been in the past. Financial reporting will continue to be a very key part of the AAA exam. And from the examiner's mouth themselves, you are much better placed to succeed in AAA if you've already studied SBR and ideally already passed it. But certainly you need to have studied SBR before you do AAA. And finally, the examiner spoke a lot about fringe topics that the students tend to perform poorly on anything unusual that is asked. And the examiner intends to continue asking you slightly unusual questions here and there on fringe topics of the syllabus. And the way the exam is designed with, there's several variations of the exam, each exam sitting, it allows the examiner to test more of these fringe topics. So we'll go through each of these in detail throughout this session. Starting with the exam changes, the syllabus changes around quality management. So quality management has been a big deal in the AAA syllabus for some time now, right? So this is not news for you if you've been studying AAA for a while. Quality management is a really key part of the syllabus and gets examined pretty much every exam for a significant number of marks, 10, 15, 20 marks. But the change that's come in is the examiner has clarified that you can be asked about the quality management of other assignments rather than just an audit. So you might be given details of some work that has been performed by the audit team on an assurance engagement, like a due diligence review or a fraud investigation or something like that. And you're asked to critically evaluate the work that has been performed. Now, the techniques that are required for that are just like the techniques that are required for critically evaluating the work on an audit. It's just a slightly different context. So I really think that's nothing to worry about. Quality management has already been emphasised more in the syllabus in the previous iteration, and it's been even further emphasised in the 24-25 syllabus. So I take that as it's much more likely to be examined, and the examiner has specifically said they intend to examine this regularly. I take that as you are always going to be asked about quality management in this exam. It's a higher level skill, isn't it, to evaluate somebody else's work. And so the examiner really likes it as a question type. And the questions are always really varied because there will be things that have been done badly in the work you're reviewing. In fact, most of the things in the work you're reviewing will have been done badly. But the details can be different every time. So the examiner loves that sort of question because it's not about rote learning, it's about using your exam skills. It's about analysing the scenario and evaluating why the weaknesses in the audit will lead to a lower quality or standard of work overall. Next syllabus change is to really emphasize the importance of ESG, or environmental, social and governance reporting. Now, this is the examiner really trying to reflect the real world. This stuff has become important, more important to shareholders and wider stakeholders, and therefore it's become more important to companies to report on this stuff, and therefore it's become more important to auditors that they have to review this kind of information that is being presented in or alongside the financial statements. So the AAA exam is catching up. Yeah, this is important in the real world, and therefore it's important in the exam world. So there is a whole new learning outcome in the syllabus around ESG reporting, which makes it look scary. But actually, all the stuff that is in here, in this learning outcome, is taking things that have been in the AAA syllabus for years around other engagements, just general other engagements, but it's just making them a little bit more specific to ESG reporting. But there's really nothing new in terms of stuff you need to learn or exam skills. The kind of things that are in this learning outcome is, well, should we accept an engagement to report on a company's ESG metrics? And it'll be all the same acceptance factors that would be in any engagement, whether it's an audit or another piece of work. You know, have we got the skills and competence to do the work? Have we got the staff available to do it? Is the fee enough to justify the risk that is required? Are there any ethical threats? Have we got safeguards in place that could mitigate those ethical threats? All of these things will come out of the scenario, right? So there's nothing new here to learn or new skills to develop, really. It's just applying it to an ESG question. You know, you might be advised on how would we plan effectively for an ESG engagement. And that's exactly the same as planning for any engagement. You know, making sure we've got the staff booked, making sure we've got the right resources in place, making sure that the client is aware of their responsibilities so we get the information that we require to do the work effectively. You might be specifically asked about key performance indicators around ESG. So they might ask you about, I don't know, CO2 emissions or social metrics like their wider societal impact, their staff satisfaction, these sort of things. You might be given some KPIs and asked how you would audit them. But again, this has been in the AAA syllabus for years. It's just that they're kind of saying it could be specifically in the context of ESG. And again, your exam skills, no different skills required. You have to look at the information you're given and think about perhaps audit procedures or whatever that would help you to verify the KPIs that have been given. On to procedures. On those KPIs or other information you're given around ESG, you might be asked to suggest audit procedures or assurance procedures that would give you assurance over the things that are being reported. Again, nothing new here. It's just like any procedures question. You have to find facts from the scenario you're trying to verify. You have to suggest source documents that would verify those facts. And you have to explain how your tests work, why those tests will give reassurance over the fact that you're trying to verify. Absolutely nothing new. The same skills as any procedures type question. You can be asked specifically about the level of assurance that you're going to give over this ESG stuff. And it's like any non-audit work. You know, normal audits, you give reasonable assurance, a positive opinion. Anything else, you give a negative conclusion because you are giving limited assurance, a lower level of assurance than you give on a full audit. Again, nothing new. And you might be asked specifically around the reporting with ESG. They might give you an extract from an ESG report and ask you, or an assurance report, and ask you to critically evaluate it. But again, this is no different to critically evaluating any report that is within the AAA syllabus. So again, nothing particularly new to learn. You have to use your exam skills. You know, if they give you an ESG report, assume everything in it is wrong, and your job is to go through the report and explain why each thing is flawed and how it could be improved, or why that flaw makes it of less use to a user of the report. So my main message on ESG is really don't worry, right? It's taking stuff that's already in the AAA syllabus, skills you will be developing throughout the course, and just applying them to a slightly different type of exam question. Now, the area that could be a little bit more scary is there's now a specific learning outcome around the changing environment for regulation in this area, around sustainability assurance standards. And this is designated as a hot current issue by the examiner. ISSA 5000, recently published as an exposure draft. That's what happens when there aren't any set rules yet. We don't have a proper assurance standard for it. The standard setters are currently gathering market reaction and information about what should go into that standard. So there isn't a fixed standard yet, but the exposure draft kind of gives you an idea of what will be in that standard. And ACCA have published a technical article on this. It's on the ACCA's website in the AAA section. I've also recorded a podcast edition on this, so it's well worth seeking out my podcast. Just type Ben Wilson AAA or ACCA Ben Wilson into Spotify or Google or Apple Podcasts, and you'll find this edition, and you'll find it very helpful. Goes through the article in detail. The key things that are in there. It talks about it's a little bit of a Wild West. There are multiple frameworks around reporting on sustainability metrics. Lots of different rules that, depending on which country the company is in, they might report different things. Okay, so it's not a set landscape. And that can provide challenges to the auditor because you might not have expertise in the particular reporting environment that the company is reporting in. It talks a lot in this article about materiality and how materiality is really challenging when you are looking at sustainability metrics. A company might release information about its CO2 emissions. It's releasing 5 million cubic tons of CO2. Now, when you're auditing that number, normally we like materiality to be an amount in dollars, don't we? We calculate materiality for the audit. Materiality is $2 million. And then we come to look at our CO2 emissions that we're auditing. And, well, there's a difference of, let's say, 1 million cubic tons of CO2. Is that material? Materiality is $2 million. And my CO2 emissions are out by 1 million tons or whatever it is. Different numbers. It's hard to compare it to our financial statement materiality. What we have to do as the assurance provider is set a materiality level that is specific to each of the metrics. We're happy with a difference of, let's say, 1,000 tons of CO2. That's not material, it's not significant, but 1 million might be significant or material. So it's just kind of saying that the numbers in these reports aren't financial numbers a lot of the time. They're different sorts of numbers, so you need a specific materiality for each one. It sounds really technical in the examiner's article, but actually, in reality, it's really not. The article also talks a lot about greenwashing. This is the idea that companies, because there aren't set rules at the minute about what companies have to report, they can cherry pick a little bit. They can pick the metrics that make them look good. Our CO2 emissions aren't great, so we won't report those. But we're really good on some of the other metrics, so we'll make sure, we're recycling lots. Our staff are really happy, so we'll report on those metrics, but we might not report on CO2 emissions. And that's an example of greenwashing, a term that means a company kind of trying to make itself look better by reporting on environmental and social metrics in a way that presents them in a favourable light that can be a bit misleading. So my advice for you with this area, with this exposure draft, ISSA 5000, is go and have a read of it. Okay, it's worth you reading and writing your own little summary of it, because that will help you to take in the key points that are in the article, because it is examinable specifically from September 24. A useful tip for you, and something that I did when I was reading this article, so I read it myself, and then I got ChatGPT to write me a short summary of it. And then I took that summary and rewrote it based on my understanding of the article. Saved me a bit of time, and also meant that I took in the key points in the article a bit better because I was evaluating someone else's or ChatGPT's summary of the article rather than writing it myself from scratch. So quicker and better for my learning. Useful tip for you. Now, before we go on to the exam emphasis changes, I just wanted to reassure you, right? So on my courses, I keep my courses up to date all the time, right? So I change them every sitting. But particularly when the new syllabus comes in for September each year, I fully update the course. So the course has been completely fully updated. So if you're studying with me, you're in safe hands. Everything reflects these syllabus changes. And all of the exam emphasis changes that I'm going to go through shortly, these have all been reflected in the questions that we're using in the course, particularly as we move through to the revision phase. So these changes in exam emphasis, and these are tweaks rather than anything dramatic. The first of them is that the examiner intends to continue using their new style of risk of material misstatement question. You know, a classic ROMS question gives you lots of scenario information and numbers and what have you, and then says identify and evaluate or evaluate and prioritize the significant risks of material misstatement. So you have to go through the scenario, find the risks, then explain why they are particularly significant. That's your job. That's the normal question. And if you look through the past papers, loads of them are of that style. But the examiner has trialed a new style. And this new style is to tell you what the risk of material misstatement is. They say to you, inventory has been identified as a risk of material misstatement. Explain why. And actually, it sounds like a different question, but it's not really. You know that inventory is a ROM. You then have to go into the scenario and find facts and figures to help you to explain why it's at high risk of misstatement. The approach is exactly the same. So it sounds scary, different type of question, but actually it's not scary at all. And you use the same exam techniques for that sort of question as you do for a standard audit risk or ROM question. If you want to see what one of these looks like, there is one of these new style questions on the March-June 23 exam paper, which is on the ACCA's practice platform. But I would say don't go and look at it because it's really important to use the recent past exam questions in the final stages of your exam preparation. And we'll be using them as full mocks towards the end of my course, as extra mocks after you've sat the mocks within my course. Now, the examiner has also said that they intend to continue including knowledge questions, pure knowledge questions, for around 5 marks. Could be up to 8, but typically for around 5 marks. Now, these look like pure knowledge questions. It looks like you have to have memorized the textbook. You know, for example, recently they asked for a pure knowledge question about maintaining quality standards during an audit. And it looked like you had to have memorized quality standard stuff about ISQM1 and ISQM2, where there have been recent technical articles published. That's what it looked like. But actually, if you've got good exam technique, you can still go into the scenario and find ideas to help you for the knowledge question. Because in that question I asked you about quality standards, there were loads of quality standard issues within the scenario. So you could just go to those and go, oh, there's an issue around reporting. There's an issue around planning. And you can use the ideas in the scenario to actually help you with the knowledge question. So advice with these knowledge questions is, yes, it's good to read the recent technical articles. And in my course, I highlight to you when we go into revision, the top technical articles that you need to read, the ones that will be examined in this way. But my main advice is don't worry about it, because if you've got good exam skills, you can always generate an answer using the scenario, even if the examiner doesn't tell you specifically to use the scenario. Now, financial reporting will continue to be examined heavily, even more so than it has been in the past. So expect to see 10 or 15 marks in the exam that rely on your knowledge of accounting standards. That's why it's so important that you've studied SBR before you do AAA. Now, as we move into the revision phase of my course, we will be spending a lot of time making sure you are up to speed on financial reporting. But for now, a really good thing to do is go back over your SBR notes. Yeah, and maybe listen to Tom Clendon's SBR podcast. It's really good. And finally, the examiner has said that they are going to continue to examine more fringe topics. Things like the role of the audit committee. What does internal audit do? Tendering for work. These are all examples of slightly unusual areas where students have struggled because the examiner is testing you on something you weren't quite expecting to come up. Now, there's two approaches you can take. Either you go, I need to memorize everything in the textbook because they can ask me about anything. That is a dreadful approach, hugely inefficient. Do not do that. A much better approach is to go, I'll have great exam technique. Whatever they ask me about, I know there will be clues in the scenario that will help me to generate an answer. So as long as I know a little bit about audit committees, a bit about what they do, I don't need to worry about memorizing everything about them because I know that in the scenario, the examiner will have dropped little clues that I can use to help me to generate an effective answer that will pass the question. Right, well, that's it for this video going through the syllabus and exam emphasis changes. I hope you found it useful. Best of luck for the rest of your AAA preparation.